This is in r/solo role-playing, just entitled Newbie. I am completely new to solo RPGs. I have heard Ironsworn is a good starter, but any other suggestions? I'd like to compare them before beginning. Thanks. Greetings, mortals. Today, I'm going to be looking through some Reddit posts that have been curated for me, and giving out unsolicited GM advice, just my opinions on things in general. Let's start off with some GMing advice. Yes, u/BKC12112. Ironsworn, I haven't personally played, but I have watched Me, Myself, and Die's solo campaign using Ironsworn, and it seems like an excellent game to start with solo role-playing. Another one, if you're familiar with 5e, I would recommend, thematically similar, is Dungeon World, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game that is a lot easier, it's a lot less crunchy and more story focused, so I find that to be a strong possibility for solo RPGs. And also the one that I have the most experience playing solo is Cairn. Cairn is a very simple game, and well, it might not be the best, but I found it very fun. You have to be very careful doing solo role-playing in Cairn because your player character is quite squishy and very easily killed in their first encounter. I had one solo game that lasted one session, and then the other one lasted a few sessions, but after that, I decided that if I was going to do quote-unquote solo role-playing with Cairn again, I would do it with a party of PCs, maybe one of which that I played as the main character and others that I played as NPCs, because it's fun to have NPCs as part of a group, even if you're playing by yourself. Okay, this is an r/Dungeons and Dragons. DMs, what tricks do you use to help your players flesh out their characters? Personally, I love getting everyone to privately message me some rumors about their character, then spread them out amongst the others. There are some really wacky ones. It's also good fun to get people to introduce themselves to the table in character. I love finding ways to get players thinking about their characters and developing them more over the course of the campaign. Rumors are a very fun way to get people thinking about their characters and introduce those characters to the other players as well, which is really what you want to do, because if somebody just writes a 10-page backstory completely fleshed out on their own, but then has no interest in sharing that backstory or bringing that backstory into play in your campaign, then it's kind of wasted effort. One of the things that I really like to do is sit players... Yes, that was the word I was looking for. I don't know why I thought I messed up. Is sit players together when you are coming up with character concepts, not just during character creation. And then the players often will decide that their characters know each other or have some connection that occurred before the game is actually starting. And that is a sure way to have people with pre-established relationships, which will then be much more inclined to get along and roleplay with each other. All right, let's do one more GM advice. How do you handle communicating in a fight? From r/D&D, and this is about 5th edition. I'm not sure how to properly handle players talking in combat. I do want to encourage them to come up with plans or strategies and work together, and it would make sense that they're able to shout things at each other in combat, like, charm that guy. If someone had an idea that needed that guy to be charmed and they didn't have to have the spell themselves. Of course, they can't huddle together and work out a full strategy mid-fight, but telling each other what to do next as a setup for cooler/more effective attacks sounds reasonable. However, I don't know how to handle that game-wise. I could let each of them only talk on their turn, but that seems weird for the RP aspect if one person says do this, and then the other person can't even say anything, like what or why would I do that, without having to wait a full combat round to get an answer, like just trust me. If I let them speak outside of their turns, it could easily turn into everyone basically holding a meeting and only acting after the entire round is planned. I could give them a limit of a sentence or two, and if they get an answer, maybe they can react with 1 or 2 more sentences. This is this is too complicated. Maybe I could just cut them off when I think they've said enough. I want to do this mostly so supporting spells or actions are used more often. If the enemies are all over the place, an AoE that might slow or take out only 2 of 6 enemies is likely not going to be used, and I've been in that situation before where I quickly swapped to useful sounding support spell because I never ended up using it, as it would have been a waste of spell slots. Yeah, so you're overthinking this way too much. You're trying to make this too simulationist and not realizing that it is in fact a game, and a game that your players want to be good at and play as optimally as they can, or at least as optimally as is fun for them. Don't worry about limiting how much your players can talk sitting at the table, as long as they're not, spending 10 minutes coming up with a plan. Really what it comes down to is let people share their opinions, and then make sure that the person whose turn it is makes the final decision on what their character is going to do. And if they are taking a little bit too long, you can just say, what does character's name do? I really wouldn't worry about limiting people talking unless they're like going on and on and on. And then you just have to ask that player to be like, hey, respect what we're doing here in game. But it is perfectly reasonable to assume that in many of the hours that you didn't actually play out minute by minute in game, the people in this party have talked and strategized and shared all of their abilities, and that they have theorized what they might do in any number of situations. And so when it actually comes time in the fight, they can just say, oh, here's this. And then the characters already know what they've planned and discussed to do in this situation, even if it takes the actual players a little bit more explaining and discussion at the table to figure out that course of action. But it definitely isn't something that you should stress too much about. If anything, limiting how much your players can talk is going to limit their fun. So let them have their agency as long as they're not dragging the game down for everybody else. Let them strategize, let them play the game to the best of their ability, and keep in mind that their characters know their abilities and the abilities of their friends probably better than the players know the other characters' abilities. There's plenty of leeway for hand-waving knowledge about each other's abilities when it comes to the fiction of the game. Of course, there are sirens. They're quieter now, but I feel like they're gonna come back. Or more will pass by, rather. That's enough advice. Let's look at a crazy Let's look at a crazy in-game story titled Just a Cow. The party was in a magic item shop. The DM had been using stock maps, and for some reason, there was a cow statue in the corner. It got the players' attention right away, and the DM just deflected and said, oh, it's just a cow, ignore it. The party bought it anyways and named it Stefan. There is something deeply wrong with Stefan. The theory was that there's some kind of eldritch nightmare creature trapped inside. Evidence 1. When the statue was in the shop, one of the PCs caught it moving to look at him out of the corner of his eye. But when he turned to look at the statue, it immediately stopped moving. As you do if you are a moving statue. You stop when anybody turns to look at you. That's just the rules. Evidence 2, the party had a ship and they used Stefan as the figurehead of the ship. That's very good. While sailing, they got attacked by a dragon. The dragon locked eyes with Stefan and entered a staring contest. The dragon lost and ran away in fear. Yes, Stefan is absolutely either a lich's phylactery or a vessel for an eldritch being of some kind, and your party seems to have made friends with this cow and whatever being it might contain, and that is a good thing. Stay on its good side. Offer it the finest of your goods, and perhaps perform a blood sacrifice or two to appease it, and then it will continue to scare away dragons and other such similar useful activities. Sometimes it's better not to know. I would suggest not poking too deep into that. Sometimes the mysteries of the universe are best left mysteries. Let's answer a question. This is from r/D&D. Is anything banned in your game for 5th edition? This could be for any reason at all. My DM has only banned certain races that don't fit with the setting, but I'd love to hear what is banned in your game and why. Yes, there are some things banned in certain ones of my games. I try to mix it up a little bit, and I try to have like different game worlds that I run so that I can try out different things. But I really do like to kind of drill down on a certain theme, a certain genre, or just a certain setting to explore, and sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes you have to pull a Skyrim and say, the dwarves disappeared, and the dragons have been gone for centuries, and that's just, you know, the way it is, and so nobody can play dwarves, and nobody like fought a dragon in their backstory or something like that. Or it could be something like I talked about in a previous video. The GM might want to run a low magic campaign, and so they limit the classes and also possibly races that people might play in their game to what makes sense. You might have a GM who wants to run an only human game because that adds an element of realism and believability to the setting if there's only humans, and maybe there are elves, but they're just not playable character races. All of that is extremely valid, and I have done my fair share of this and that. And, you know, I like the high fantasy games, and I like the human-only games, and I like the games where you can play whatever crazy race is in, you know, Volo's Guide to Monsters or whatever the heck they're coming out with these days, the owlins and the elephants, and, you know, elephants have been around for a while, but you know what I mean. Those are fun, but then also sometimes it's fun to just have a classic, you know, Tolkien-esque fantasy party with nothing too crazy, like vibrant, iridescent tieflings, because sometimes that can break verisimilitude. And if you're aiming for a certain type of game and everybody's on board with that, there are certain things that won't fit. And it's up for the GM to communicate that and for the players to accept that graciously and all join in the same type of game so that everybody can have fun. All right, well, that's all I have for you today, mortals. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more type of content like this, please do all the stuff, by which I mean subscribe, comment, like, share this to your friends if you think they would think it's entertaining, and check out some other videos on the channel. There'll be some on screen right now, or maybe they were already up for a little bit already, but you know how YouTube works. Good night, mortals.